tough new questions for Democrats, from a big city mayor all the way to the president of the United States. After an illegal immigrant with a criminal history and 5 separate deportations finds his way to the sanctuary city of San Francisco, where he is now accused of murdering a young woman in cold blood.
45-year-old Francisco Sanchez was deported 5 times after committing 7 felonies, but he made his way back to the sanctuary city of San Francisco and murdered 32-year-old Catherine Steinle. Here's his confession.
Did you shoot Kate Steinle, the lady who was down on Pier 14?
Yes.
The shooting happened last week in San Francisco on a pier popular with tourists. Pretty much anybody who's visited the city would know this area. The victim's dad says they were walking on an evening walk or talking while walking along when the sister collapsed. She'd taken a bullet to the chest and died in her father's arms.
The feds say this tragedy could have been prevented if they had been notified of the suspect's release. Sanchez said he kept returning to San Francisco because he knew there would be no effort to deport him there.
San Francisco is a sanctuary city. Did you keep coming back to San Francisco because you knew that they wouldn't actively look for you to deport you?
Yes.
White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest was asked about Sanchez falling through the cracks. Earnest blamed Republicans for blocking immigration reform, and then he said this. Play it.
I can't talk about the details of this specific case. I'd refer you to DHS for how our efforts to focus on felons is implemented.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, says it asked the sheriff to notify federal agents before Sanchez was released so he could be deported, saying, and I'm quoting, "We're not asking local law enforcement to do our job. All we're asking is that they notify us when a serious foreign national criminal offender is being released to the street so we can arrange to take custody." The sheriff's department says it's just following policy and is not allowed to play ball with immigration agents.
Virginia Republican Bob Goodlatte, he is chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Chairman, thank you for joining us tonight.
Good to be with you, Shannon, and your viewers.
Okay, so let me ask you, who do you think's responsible here? Is it San Francisco? Is it the feds? Or is it, as the White House has suggested, and the San Francisco mayor, House GOP lawmakers who refuse to go along with their version of immigration reform?
Oh, well, it absolutely is the responsibility of the parties that are responsible for enforcing our current law. That includes the Bureau of Prisons, which we learned today had a detainer presented to them by ICE. They turned him over to San Francisco instead of to ICE. It's ICE because they are not consistently enforcing our policy and releasing thousands of criminal aliens onto our streets. And certainly San Francisco should back away from this sanctuary city policy that leads to tragedies like this. And my heart goes out to Kate Steinle's family. This is an avoidable tragedy. But at heart of all of this is the issue of whether or not this administration is consistently enforcing our immigration laws. They are not. Why would you release someone who has been deported from the United States 5 times and has 7 felony convictions? Why would you release them back out onto your own streets without you contacting the feds? Certainly the feds could have done more than they did, but San Francisco also could have contacted them. And we also have to factor into this new issue where ICE had apparently notified the Bureau of Prisons, where he'd been incarcerated, to detain him and turn him over to ICE, and instead they turned him over to San Francisco.
San Francisco is a sanctuary city, something I was totally opposed to, having worked in the San Francisco District Attorney's office. It's bad.
Sanctuary City is the product of a progressive fantasy ideology where feelings trump fact, and trump safety and freedom, that somehow the freedom of an illegal alien is more important than the people who live there.
Well, I was a prosecutor in that city, and let me tell you something. It was like the prosecutor should be taken away in handcuffs for some felony crime. If you asked an individual in court that was a repeat offender, recidivist, and you said, "Please, sir, give your true and correct name to the court," you would have to fingerprint, do everything to figure it out because they have 15 different aliases trying to avoid the law.
Because there is no legal definition of a sanctuary city, what it means varies from place to place. But Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, says currently there are more than 200 states, cities, and local jurisdictions with policies that help shelter illegal immigrants from being deported. We can't show them all, but on this map, red indicates states that have one or more sanctuary cities. And while most of the sanctuary cities have decided not to cooperate with federal agents, there is confusion on how the feds plan to deal with them. For example, back on March 19th, the new ICE director, Sarah Saldana, went before Congress and begged for help. Listen to her.
Last calendar year, state and local jurisdictions rejected more than 12,000 ICE detainer requests. These are convicted criminals.
Would it help you if we clarified the law to make it clear that it was mandatory that those local communities cooperate with you?
Thank you. Amen. Okay. Yes.
Amen. But after getting pressure from the ACLU, immigrants' rights groups, and others, one day later, Saldana made an abrupt about-face, saying, quoting here, any effort at federal legislation now to mandate state and local law enforcement's compliance with ICE detainers will, in our view, be a highly counterproductive step and lead to more resistance and less cooperation in our overall efforts to promote public safety. And yet, when the San Francisco Sheriff's Office ignored an ICE detainer and released suspected killer Francisco Sanchez, ICE told us, quoting again, we're not asking local law enforcement to do our job. All we're asking is that they notify us when a serious foreign national criminal offender is being released to the street so we can arrange to take custody. It's unclear if Director Saldana gave that statement an amen.
Obviously, someone got to Miss Saldana.
Absolutely. What happened is she was called on the carpet because the immigration groups and the ACLU went ballistic, and she was forced to recant her statement. And this is the problem we have right now, Megan, is that we have a total collapse of the system that is supposed to protect us from criminal illegal aliens being released into our communities at both the federal and the state level. I mean, President Obama, if you recall, when he issued that immigration order, executive order, he said we're going to focus on families, on felons, not families, on criminals, not children. And what they're doing are two things. This is what's happening. Number one, the Obama administration is releasing every year tens of thousands of criminal aliens into our communities. And at the same time, they are protecting the now 200 plus cities across this country that have sanctuary policies.
That's it right there, because the fault is clearly with San Francisco for having the policy in the first place and allowing this guy back out when there was an ICE detainer on him, which they did not honor. And their response is, ICE knows we don't honor those. What? That doesn't excuse you for not doing it. Okay, so the fault is clearly with them. But the question is, what has the Obama administration done to hold these sanctuary cities accountable?
Absolutely nothing. I mean, the director of ICE asked Congress to help her. She came to them and pleaded with them, saying that the lack of cooperation is increasing, the problem is getting worse, and said amen when they said, well, would you like some authority to crack down on these folks?
And said, yes, thank you, yes.
Yes, amen, amen.
And then she got sent to the woodshed. Clearly, she was taken out behind the woodshed. I mean, we've seen it happen before. We saw it happen with Dempsey and Hagel when they came out and spoke the truth about ISIS and then had reversed themselves. But this is clear as day, and it is on a very controversial issue. This is the woman in charge of ICE who is begging them for help, and yet none was provided, and she was forced to reverse her own position on it. Mark, I'll give you the last word.
Sure, but it's also, I want to make clear, it's not just the local community's fault. The federal government is at fault, too, because, one, they're releasing all these people, and two, there was a Boston Globe investigation that found that they have released hundreds of sexual predators who are criminal aliens, and they fail to tell the local communities that they've released them or even make them register as sex offenders. So the problem is both at the federal and the local level, and it's getting worse.
The point is that the Obama administration is not allowing ICE agents to go in and arrest these people and deport them. This is a systematic failure at all levels. A young woman is dead. This is not an isolated incident. Just last year, there were 2 California sheriff's deputies who were killed by an illegal alien who was deported multiple times, which is a failure of border policy. So it goes hand in hand. And to me, the White House response to this today was amazing. Josh Earnest is asked at the podium, what do you have to say about what happened in San Francisco? And his comment is, we're not going to say anything. I think that you should ask DHS about that. We're not going to comment on this specific case. When it is the Obama administration that has released 50,000 plus criminal aliens with murder charges, rape charges, murder convictions onto the streets of America, and they don't want to comment on this specific case when that is their track record.
She's right, because this dovetails together. It's not just a sanctuary city issue. It's also a federal issue because they are not enforcing the laws as written on the books.
arrest. Yesterday, as the fog cleared along San Francisco's waterfront, friends paid their respects to Steinle. She had recently moved to San Francisco for work and is being remembered as a compassionate, free spirit.